The Rosetta Stone has long been the key to unlocking Egyptian hieroglyphics, and it remains one of the most valuable and irreplaceable artifacts in the British Museum. For over 200 years, it has served as our main gateway to understanding ancient Egypt. The Rosetta Stone is a stela, and it reveals a fascinating interaction between three different scripts. Scholars believe the original message was composed in Greek to honor the pharaoh as a divine being, yet significant portions of the text have always been missing, entire lines worn away by centuries. Now, AI has accomplished what generations of specialists could not. It has reconstructed the missing passages, matched faint markings with actual words, and uncovered the stone's fuller message. Champollion suspected that the circular symbol represented the sun, and from Coptic he knew it carried the sound Ra. What these restored lines reveal is now transforming our understanding of ancient Egypt in ways no one expected. The Rosetta Stone, what we found and what we lost. It began in the blistering heat of an Egyptian summer, the final July of the 18th century. Napoleon's soldiers were scattered across the Nile Delta, raising forts, digging earthworks, and fighting the climate as much as the enemy. Near the town of Rashid, called Rosetta by Europeans, a young engineer, Pierre-François Bouchard, supervised repairs at a battered fort named Fort Julian. As troops tore down a crumbling wall, a dark, polished slab caught his eye. Covered in neat rows of script, it was no ordinary stone. Bouchard halted the demolition, ordered the block lifted with care, and sent word to Cairo. By mid-July 1799, the curious slab was on its way to the capital for study. What they had uncovered wasn't treasure or statue, but a fragment of a royal decree carved more than 2,000 years earlier. The same proclamation appeared 3 times on the surface, in hieroglyphs at the top, in Demotic script in the middle, and in ancient Greek at the base. The decree, issued by priests in Memphis, honored their young king, Ptolemy V. Those 3 inscriptions are what made the find extraordinary. Greek remained readable. It became the key that would unlock Egypt's long-silent language. The stone itself was smaller and denser than popular imagination suggests, a compact block of dark, speckled granodiorite, tougher than granite, flecked with pink and gray minerals that catch the light. Standing roughly 3 feet 8 inches tall, just over 2.5 feet wide and about 11 inches thick, it weighed roughly 1,675 pounds. Shifting it required ropes, rollers, and great care. Its modern odyssey began amid war. After a prolonged siege, the French garrison in Alexandria surrendered to British and Ottoman forces, and under the capitulation terms, antiquities collected by Napoleon's scholars, including the Rosetta slab, were handed over. By early 1802, the stone had reached England. It was shown to the Society of Antiquaries and soon placed on display at the British Museum, where it remains. Along one edge today, painted lettering still reads, "Captured in Egypt by the British Army in 1801, presented by King George III." Back in Cairo, printers and scholars did everything possible to copy the inscriptions. Jean-Joseph Marcel took impressions directly from the stone's face. Niccolo Conti, who had lost an eye in battle, inked the slab and pressed damp paper to it, producing new perfect negatives of the carved letters. In London, the Society of Antiquaries ordered plaster casts that were sent to the universities at Oxford, Cambridge, Edinburgh, and Dublin. Within months, rubbings and engraved reproductions spread across Europe and reached America. The Decree of Ptolemy V became, in effect, the first globally distributed ancient text of its kind. The Greek portion proved the most accessible, and by 1803 it was fully translated. It confirmed the stone contained an official decree praising the king and granting privileges to temples and priests. The Demotic section, Egypt's everyday script, attracted the attention of scholars like Sylvester de Sacchi and the Swedish diplomat Johann David Ackerblad. They spotted repeating patterns in royal names and inferred that some signs represented sounds. The crucial breakthrough, however, came from the British polymath Thomas Young. By comparing Greek names to those in the Demotic and then examining the hieroglyphs above, he noticed oval rings, later called cartouches, wrapping groups of symbols. Inside one, Young read letters resembling Ptolemaios, a small but seismic discovery that suggested hieroglyphs could represent phonetic sounds as well as ideas. 2 decades later, the puzzle was fully cracked. In 1822, the young French philologist Jean-François Champollion revealed that Egyptian hieroglyphs combined pictorial and phonetic elements to form a genuine writing system. Drawing on his knowledge of Coptic, the late descendant of ancient Egyptian speech, Champollion demonstrated that hieroglyphic signs obeyed grammar and syntactic rules like any language. On September 14, 1822, he announced his decipherment to the Paris Academy and nearly fainted from excitement. Ancient Egyptian, long thought inscrutable, had effectively come back to life. Yet the Rosetta Stone was badly damaged. The hieroglyphic register at the top lost most of its lines. Only 14 survive. The demotic middle section contains 32 lines, though the beginnings of 14 are gone. The Greek base held 54 lines, but a diagonal break removed the ends from 26 of them. That diagonal fracture hints at the original monument shape. Comparable decrees from the period show that such stele usually had rounded tops carved with scenes of the king before God. Measuring those examples suggests roughly half a foot of hieroglyphic text once sat above the present break. That missing upper portion has never been recovered. Today, the stone preserves only about 2/3 of the original inscription. Thankfully, this particular decree wasn't unique. The Greek text explicitly ordered the same proclamation to be inscribed in the sacred script, the native script, and Greek, and displayed in temples across Egypt. Because of that mandate, multiple copies were carved, and a number of them survive. A limestone stela from Nubia preserves segments lost on the Rosetta slab. Others were found carved into temple walls at Philly, Elephantine, and elsewhere. These duplicates aren't carbon copies. Each bears slight regional variations, some inserting the queen's name after her marriage, others emphasizing local military victories. They don't contradict the Rosetta version. They reflect local politics and pride. For modern scholars, those variants are invaluable. Where one copy ends mid-phrase, another often continues, allowing researchers to reconstruct the original decree line by line. Directionality of the scripts helps too. Demotic reads right to left, Greek left to right, and hieroglyphs, clustered in small pictorial groups, also run right to left. Once you know how to read each system, the missing passages become reconstructible, since one script often rescues what another has lost. Still, some text remains irretrievable, and that's where artificial intelligence now plays a role. Using ultra-high-resolution imaging, researchers can scan the stone surface to reveal the faintest grooves invisible to the unaided eye. Those scans produce digital maps that capture even the shallowest tool marks. Machine learning models train on thousands of hieroglyphic examples and analyze the patterns and propose likely matches for damaged signs. The process doesn't invent content from thin air. It detects statistical patterns and compares damaged areas to surviving portions and other copies of the decree, predicting which symbols most plausibly fill the gaps. The decree's content, however, was never a mystery. It praises Ptolemy V for benevolence, cutting taxes, granting lands to temples, freeing prisoners, and commissioning statues to honor the gods. It orders that the decree be displayed in 3 scripts and installed in the major temples so priests, scribes, and Greek officials could all read it. The Rosetta Stone became the bridge that allowed modern scholars to reconstruct Egypt's language. Now, in the age of advanced imaging and AI, it has become the bridge between human scholarship and machine inference, helping to restore the lines that time erased. Piece by piece, light and code are accomplishing what even the sharpest minds of the 19th century could not, making the stone speak again. How artificial intelligence read what time erased. How did artificial intelligence recover what time had scraped away from the worn surface of the Rosetta Stone? Beneath the scratches and eroded cuts, a faint message still survives, a voice from more than 2 millennia ago, buried under damage and decay. To uncover that voice, researchers didn't begin by translating anything. They began by looking at the stone with tools capable of detecting what the human eye can no longer see. The first step was light. The team working on what is now known as a digital Rosetta Stone project rephotographed the entire artifact, taking image after image from different angles while shifting the direction of the light each time. Even slight changes in illumination make grooves cast shadows or edges catch light. By merging all these images, they created a detailed height map, a 3-dimensional reconstruction of every rise and hollow on the surface. The stone becomes a digital terrain. Researchers can tilt it, zoom into it, and sweep light across it to expose details finer than grains of sand. Spots that appeared flat suddenly reveal traces of carvings. But shape alone doesn't solve everything. Long ago, the Rosetta Stone was painted. The colors have faded, but small residues of pigment remain deep in the cuts. To detect them, scientists use hyperspectral imaging, a form of photography that captures hundreds of wavelengths, including many invisible to the naked eye. Under certain wavelengths, minerals, dyes, and even old tool marks glow in unique patterns. Areas that look blank under normal lighting begin to show the faint shadows of missing signs. By merging these invisible color bands, conservators revive details that would otherwise stay lost. Even then, the work is only halfway done. The next challenge is teaching computer to interpret the shapes carved into the stone. Egyptian hieroglyphs don't run in straight, tidy lines. Symbols can stack, overlap, and cluster in ways that confuse conventional software. Birds form perches above bowls. Snakes twist beside reeds. For a computer, that's an overwhelming tangle of lines. So researchers trained an AI model to detect and outline each sign individually. They fed it thousands of images of known hieroglyphs, falcons, eyes, cobras, and dozens of others, until it understood what each symbol should look like. The original model had been built to identify everyday objects like cars and people, but after retraining, it learned to trace the ancient carvings on the stone surface. Once ready, it could automatically isolate each symbol, even in places where the designs overlap or fade. The result is a digital version of the text where each hieroglyph has a clean outline, almost as if the stone had been marked with invisible ink. But identifying symbols is only step one. The real question is, what do these signs mean when placed together? For that, researchers use another kind of AI, systems that learn language patterns the way translators do. Modern transformer models learn which symbols typically appear alongside each other. Just as a phrase "thank" is usually followed by "you," certain hieroglyph sequences often repeat. This pattern recognition helps fill in missing portions. When the edge of the stone breaks off and some signs are gone, the model examines the surrounding context and predicts what ought to be there. This is exactly what a project called the Hieroglyphic Transformer was designed to do. Using the massive Berlin-based Thesaurus Linguae Egypti, one of the largest databases of Egyptian texts, researchers trained a system that could take a string of symbols and suggest which ones were likely missing. It isn't guessing blindly. It analyzes known language habits to narrow down the possibilities. The effectiveness of this two-part method, one model that sees the signs and another that understands them, is what powers the modern Rosetta reconstruction. The vision model identifies the carvings still visible, and the language model uses context to fill the gaps. Together, they restore lines that haven't been complete since antiquity. This approach builds on early advances. In 2019, scientists developed an AI called Pythia to predict missing letters in damaged Greek inscriptions. It compared broken sections to thousands of existing examples, and in most cases, the correct answer appeared among its top suggestions. A later system named Ithaca expanded those capabilities. It could not only repair missing text, but also estimate the date and origin of an inscription. In controlled tests, historians who use Ithaca produce better results more quickly. For the Rosetta Stone, these tools are incredibly useful. There are several surviving copies of the decree carved at different sites, such as Nubea and Philly. AI can compare these instantly and highlight which sections match. Work that once required days of manual cross-referencing can now be done in seconds. By 2025, similar techniques have been applied to Latin texts. DeepMind introduced a system called Anagnostis, designed to scan damaged passages and search for parallels in other ancient writings. It can analyze both text and imagery to find references to the same people, places, or phrases. When all these stages are combined, the reconstruction process becomes surprisingly smooth. First, experts build a flawless digital rendering by merging thousands of variably lit photographs into a 3D model. This brings out even the shallowest cuts, marks invisible to the eye but preserved in the stone. Next, AI outlines every surviving hieroglyph and assigns it a digital identity, labeling it as a falcon, a reed, or another symbol. Then these symbols are aligned with the two other scripts on the stone, Demotic and Greek, since all three sections contain the same decree. When the hieroglyphic portion breaks off, the system automatically cross-checks the copies carved elsewhere in Egypt. If a line missing on the Rosetta Stone appears intact in another version, the AI uses that as a reference. The Greek text also acts as a guide. Since it's clear, linear writing helped determine how long each line should be. Several major resources made this possible. Google's Fabricius project, released in 2020, allowed scholars and the public to label hieroglyphs, generating training data for AI. Ubisoft Hieroglyphics Initiative also collaborated with Egyptologists to gather thousands of hand-tagged images of Egyptian symbols. These projects gave AI models the examples they needed to learn the shapes accurately. Once the AI proposes possible restorations for missing lines, researchers verify them. They check the suggestions against Egypt's authoritative dictionaries and databases. The Thesaurus Linguae Egypti allows experts to search for known uses of specific words across 3,000 years of writing. The Chicago Demotic Dictionary provides detailed explanations of how words in the middle script, the one closely related to the Rosetta text, were used in legal, economic, and religious contexts. These references act as filters. If an AI-generated phrase breaks grammatical rules or includes a non-existent word, it's discarded. If it matches a phrase found in another version of the decree, it's accepted. One advantage of these AI systems is their transparency. They don't simply give an answer, they show how they reached it. Tools like Ithaca and Anagnostis list the sources they compared and the confidence behind each suggestion. Scholars can retrace the machine's reasoning and decide for themselves whether they agree. Of course, the technology has its limits. AI cannot invent carvings where none exist, and researchers are careful to avoid forcing interpretations that the physical evidence doesn't support. The stone, its grooves, space, and surface, always takes precedence. If a faint cut contradicts the model's suggestion, the cut is correct. If a predicted word is too long to fit physically in the damaged space, it's wrong. Now that these lost lines are being reconstructed, a final question remains. What do these restored words actually reveal? Do they alter our understanding of the decree, the priest who wrote it, or the young ruler they honored? The real message behind the Rosetta Stone. The true meaning behind the Rosetta Stone becomes clear only when the missing lines are restored. Instead of a mysterious artifact, the stone turns into a vivid glimpse of how ancient Egypt actually worked, a world shaped by politics, economics, and the constant balancing of power. More than 2,000 years ago, Egypt was still recovering from years of instability. A young king, Ptolemy V, ruled a country where the most influential figures weren't generals or governors but priests. They controlled immense temple wealth, held spiritual authority, and managed large portions of land. If the king wanted stability, he needed their loyalty. That, at its core, is what the decree on the Rosetta Stone represents. With the new lines filled in, the text reads almost like a negotiated contract. The king grants privileges, and the priests repay him with honor, legitimacy, and public devotion. The decree outlines tax reductions, financial exemptions, gifts of grain, and pardons. In return, the priests promise prayers, celebrations, and rituals that present the king as divinely chosen. The Greek portion spells out these arrangements most clearly. It explains that Ptolemy reduced certain taxes, abolished others entirely, and tried to ease the burden on soldiers and farmers. It confirms that temples retain control of their own wealth, their fields, vineyards, silver, and stored grain, protected from state interference. Even the tax rate applied to the priests themselves was frozen so that future rulers could never raise it. What seems like dry accounting was, for Egyptians, a matter of survival. The restored lines also reveal moments of compassion. The king released prisoners who had been wrongly detained and ended forms of forced labor that had torn families apart. He sent resources to care for sacred animals, especially the revered Apis bulls believed to be living embodiments of the gods. Even the Nile appears in the narrative. The Greek text records that in the king's 8th year, the river rose unusually high. Instead of a catastrophe, the king turned it into a blessing by having the excess water stored for farmers. To Egyptians, whose entire existence depended on the Nile's rhythm, this act became a symbol of wise leadership. Writing it into a decree sent a clear message from the palace to every farming village. The king was watching over them, and the gods approved. In return, the priest pledged new festivities in his honor, celebrations of his birthday and coronation, daily offerings before his image, and hymns praising his name in every temple. These acts weren't only religious, they were political. They kept the king's reputation alive in the minds of the people. The decree was never meant to stand alone. It ordered that copies be carved and displayed in temples throughout the land. And that's exactly what happened. Southern copies emphasize the king's recapture of Thebes after years of rebellion, while northern versions focus on his victory at Lycopolis. Later recensions even added new royal names, such as Cleopatra after her marriage to Ptolemy V. Restoring the text also settles a major scholarly debate: which version of the decree was written first? The evidence now points to the Demotic version, the fast, everyday script used for administration. Its phrasing flows like a practical government document. The Greek version, by contrast, often reads awkwardly, suggesting it was translated afterward. Even the hieroglyphic text, written for temple display, omits certain explanatory signs that appear in the Demotic. The same pattern appears in the tax sections. Greek uses formal bureaucratic terminology, while Demotic conveys the same information in the tone of a clerk drawing up a contract. Once the missing pieces are restored, both versions align almost verbatim, disproving the long-held idea that the Egyptian texts were merely symbolic. They carried the same legal force, simply in the languages Egyptians actually used. The reconstruction also clarifies the chronology. The decree dates itself to the 9th year of Ptolemy V's reign and ties its announcements to specific festivals and anniversaries. And the place it was issued, Memphis, is no coincidence. Although Alexandria was the capital, Memphis was a traditional center of royal power, home to the great temple of Ptah and the site where pharaohs were crowned. Choosing Memphis was a strategic move rooted in religion, politics, and heritage all at once. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out the videos appearing on screen for more astonishing stories.